Have you ever noticed that we are surrounded by people, yet sometimes we still feel lonely? And at the same time, there are moments when we are completely alone, but we feel deeply connected, peaceful, and even powerful. Why is that? It is because loneliness and aloneness are not the same. Loneliness is emptiness, but aloneness is fullness. When you are alone with God, you are never truly alone. Being alone is not weakness, it is strength. It is the moment when your soul whispers, when your heart connects to the higher power, and when your mind finds its true direction. Today I want to share with you the power of being alone, not as isolation, but as divine connection, as self-discovery, and as spiritual growth. When you are alone, it may first appear as if you are isolated, as if the world has gone silent and there is nothing around you. But if you look deeper, you will notice that being alone is actually a door to connect with God. In the business of our daily lives, we are constantly surrounded by noise. Noise from people, noise from responsibilities, noise from the world outside, and even the endless noise of our own mind. In such an environment, the presence of God becomes difficult to feel because the stillness that invites His whisper is missing. Aloneness is not emptiness, it is space. It is the sacred pause that allows you to feel the presence of the divine more intimately. Think about it. When you are surrounded by people, your attention is divided. Your mind runs in multiple directions, worrying about what others think, adjusting to what others expect, and trying to fulfill different roles. But when you are alone, there is no performance, no masks, no expectations. You are just you with your breath, your heart, your soul, and God. That is when you begin to realize that aloneness is not about being without people. It is about being with the one who created people. Many times in life, people fear being alone. They say, I don't want to sit alone. I don't want to walk alone. I don't want to eat alone. But the truth is, you are never alone because God is always present. The question is not whether He is with you. The question is whether you are aware of His presence. And awareness comes in aloneness. When you sit in silence, when you close your eyes, when you allow yourself to step away from the constant noise, you suddenly feel a calmness rising from within. That calmness is not random. That calmness is the divine making Himself known to you. Imagine a person who spends a few minutes every morning sitting alone in quiet reflection. No phone, no social media, no distractions. Just sitting with eyes closed, breathing deeply, and silently offering gratitude to God. That person may walk out into the day with a different kind of energy, calm, centered, and strong. Why? Because in those moments of aloneness, he connected with something beyond himself. He tuned into the presence of God, and that divine connection gives him strength to face the day. On the other hand, think of someone who never allows themselves to be alone. They constantly surround themselves with people, with television, with endless activities just to avoid silence. That person may be busy, but deep down they feel restless, incomplete, and anxious. Why? Because they are disconnected from their own soul and disconnected from God. Busyness may distract you, but only aloneness can connect you. Aloneness also teaches you that true strength does not come from the outside world, but from within. When you sit alone and close your eyes, you start realizing that everything you need is already inside you, because God has placed it there. The courage to face challenges, the wisdom to make decisions, the love to heal relationships, the patience to wait for the right moment. All these gifts are already planted in your heart by God. But you will only discover them when you give yourself the space to be alone and listen. Even in nature, we can see this lesson. A seed grows in darkness, deep in the soil, completely alone. Nobody sees it, nobody applauds it, nobody appreciates it. But in that quiet aloneness, something powerful happens. The seed breaks open, and life begins to emerge. Later, it grows into a tree that gives shade, fruit, and shelter. But all of that began in aloneness. Your soul is just like that seed. God sometimes places you in moments of solitude, not to punish you, but to prepare you. That is where your roots grow deeper and your connection with Him becomes unshakable. So, instead of running away from being alone, embrace it. Turn off the noise for a while. Put aside the distractions. Sit with yourself and remember that you are sitting with God. Talk to Him. Listen to Him. You don't always need fancy words. Sometimes silence is the most beautiful prayer. In those silent moments, you will realize that the greatest companion of your life has always been with you. People may come and go, but God remains constant. People may understand parts of you, but God understands all of you. And once you learn to enjoy your aloneness with God, your relationships with others also improve. Because now, you are not entering relationships out of desperation or emptiness. You are entering them out of wholeness and love. You no longer depend on others to complete you, because you already feel complete in your connection with God. And that makes you more peaceful, more patient, and more compassionate. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't rush to fill the space. Don't grab your phone, don't panic, don't run away. Instead, smile and say, "This is my sacred time. This is my chance to connect." And in that quiet moment, you will feel what the world cannot give you: the gentle, loving, powerful presence of God. Aloneness is not weakness, it is the hidden workshop of strength. When you are surrounded by people, you may borrow their courage, rely on their presence, or lean on their words. But when you are alone, there is no one to lean on. And that is where you discover that the greatest support you could ever have is already inside you. Aloneness is the classroom where life teaches you resilience, patience, and faith. It is in solitude that you realize you are stronger than you thought, braver than you imagined, and more capable than you believed. In daily life, many people avoid being alone because it makes them feel vulnerable. They think, if I'm alone, it means I'm weak, unwanted, or unloved. But the truth is the exact opposite. Strength is born in solitude. Think about a mountain. A mountain stands tall, unshaken by storms, winds, or rains. Does the mountain depend on other mountains to hold it up? No. It stands in its own strength, rooted deeply into the earth. In the same way, when you embrace your moments of aloneness, you begin to grow roots of courage within yourself so that no storm of life can easily shake you. Imagine a student preparing for an exam. In the classroom, the teacher explains, the students discuss, and there is collective energy. But when the exam day comes, each student sits alone with a paper and pen. No one else can write for them. No one else can give them answers. That quiet moment of sitting alone with the test reveals whether they have prepared, whether they have absorbed the knowledge, and whether they have the strength to perform. Life is exactly the same. Your exam days often come in moments of solitude. When challenges hit, when difficulties arrive, you may find yourself alone. And that is when your inner strength, built in solitude, will carry you forward. Take another example from nature: the eagle. An eagle flies alone, soaring high into the sky, away from the crowd of other birds. It does not seek comfort in flocks. Instead, it finds strength in its solitude. It flies higher than the rest, facing strong winds alone, because it knows that the higher it goes, the stronger it becomes. In the same way, when life lifts you into solitude, it is not pushing you down, it is preparing you to fly higher. Your aloneness is the wind beneath your wings, teaching you endurance, courage, and independence. Think about your own life. How many times have you faced situations where no one else could understand what you were going through? Maybe you faced a loss, a failure, or a personal struggle. People around you may have tried to comfort you, but at the end of the day, you had to sit with your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own pain. And slowly, in that solitude, you began to heal. That healing was not weakness, it was strength. It was your spirit learning to stand tall without depending on others. The truth is, God allows moments of aloneness in your life to reveal your hidden strength. When you are surrounded by people, you don't realize how powerful you are because you are carried by others' energy. But when you are alone, you have no choice but to look within. And when you look within, you discover that God has placed an ocean of strength in your heart. You realize that even if the world turns away, you can still walk forward. Even if nobody claps for you, you can still keep going. That is real strength. Aloneness also trains you to control your mind. When you are in crowds, your mind is distracted by endless voices, endless comparisons, endless expectations. But when you are alone, you are face to face with your own thoughts. At first, it feels uncomfortable, but slowly you begin to master them. You learn to quiet the negative voices, to calm your fears, and to strengthen your focus. This mental discipline becomes your greatest asset when you face challenges in life. Because a strong mind is not built in the crowd, it is built in the silence of aloneness. Another simple example, consider an athlete training for a marathon. Yes, they may run with a team sometimes, but the real training happens when they run alone in the early mornings, with no applause, no cheers, no one watching. Every drop of sweat in that solitude builds their stamina. When the race day comes and the crowd is shouting, it is not the applause that gives them strength. It is the hours of lonely training that prepared them. Life is just the same. Your moments of solitude are your training ground. They are shaping you for the race ahead. And here lies a powerful secret. Once you learn to be strong in aloneness, nothing can truly defeat you. Because people may leave, circumstances may change, but your strength remains. That strength is not borrowed, it is built. It is not given by others, it is discovered within. When you have walked through darkness alone and found light, you no longer fear the night. When you have stood up after falling with no one to lift you, you no longer fear failure. When you have spoken to God in silence and felt His strength flowing into you, you no longer fear loneliness. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't see it as weakness. See it as the gym of your soul, the workshop of your spirit, the training ground of your mind. Every minute you spend in solitude is building your inner strength, preparing you for challenges, shaping you into a warrior of resilience. Aloneness is not your enemy, it is your silent teacher. And when you embrace it, you discover that you are stronger, braver, and more capable than you ever imagined. Many people misunderstand self-love. They think it is selfishness, arrogance, or pride. But real self-love is none of these. Real self-love is simply appreciating yourself as God created you. It is understanding that you are valuable, that you are enough, and that you are worthy of respect, care, and kindness. Not because of what you do, not because of who accepts you, but because of who you are in the eyes of the divine. And one of the most powerful teachers of self-love is aloneness. When you are surrounded by people all the time, You tend to measure yourself by their reactions. If they praise you, you feel good. If they criticize you, you feel low. If they give you attention, you feel valuable. If they ignore you, you feel invisible. Your sense of worth becomes like a ball thrown from one hand to another, depending on others' moods and opinions. But when you are alone, there is no one to impress, no one to judge, no one to validate you. In that stillness, you begin to discover that your worth was never supposed to come from others. It was always within you. Think about a mirror. When you stand in front of a mirror alone, you see yourself as you are. No decorations, no filters, no audience. You may notice your imperfections, but you also begin to see your beauty. The same happens in aloneness. It is like standing in front of the mirror of your soul. You see your strengths and your flaws, and slowly you learn to accept them both with compassion. You realize, yes, I have weaknesses, but I also have strengths. Yes, I have made mistakes, but I also have goodness inside me. And despite everything, I am still worthy of love. That realization is the beginning of self-love. In daily life, many people run away from being alone because they are afraid of their own thoughts. They distract themselves with endless conversations, social media, and constant activity just so they don't have to face themselves. But the truth is, you cannot love yourself until you spend time with yourself. Just as you cannot build a relationship with someone without spending time with them, you cannot build a relationship with yourself without moments of solitude. Aloneness becomes your opportunity to sit with yourself, to get to know yourself, to forgive yourself, and to care for yourself. Take the example of a garden. If a gardener spends all his time showing the flowers to visitors, but never waters them, the garden will eventually dry up. In the same way, if you spend all your energy giving to others, but never spend time with yourself, your inner garden will lose its life. Self-love is the water that keeps your heart blooming, and aloneness is the moment when you water your soul. Aloneness also helps you stop begging for love from the world. When you don't love yourself, you start depending on others to fill the emptiness. You try to please everyone, seek approval, and chase attention, thinking that if others love you, then you must be valuable. But this only leads to disappointment because people's love is often conditional, changing, and inconsistent. In contrast, when you spend time alone, connecting with God and with yourself, you realize that you don't need to beg for love. You already have love inside you, divine love. And when you taste that love, you become free. You no longer cling to people out of desperation. Instead, you share your love with them out of fullness. Think of a candle. If it is unlit, it waits for another flame to give it life. But once it is lit, it can light up other candles without losing its own fire. Self-love works the same way. Without it, you keep waiting for others to light your flame. But when you discover self-love in your aloneness, your inner flame shines, and you can brighten the lives of others without losing yourself. Another everyday example is this. Consider a person who always surrounds themselves with friends because they cannot bear to eat a meal alone. They feel awkward, unwanted, or incomplete without company. But then, one day they decide to sit in a restaurant alone, order their favorite food, and enjoy it quietly. At first, it feels strange, but then they realize, I don't need someone else to make this meal enjoyable. I can enjoy my own company. That small act builds confidence, independence, and self-respect. Slowly, they start to enjoy moments of solitude, and they realize that their happiness does not always depend on others. Self-love is also about forgiveness. Many people carry guilt, regret, or self-criticism in their hearts. They keep punishing themselves for past mistakes, believing they are not worthy of love. But aloneness gives you the space to heal. When you sit quietly with yourself and bring your pain before God, you begin to see that mistakes are not the end, they are lessons. You realize that you are human, imperfect, but still precious. Slowly, you learn to forgive yourself, to let go of the weight of the past, and to move forward with love instead of self-hate. And here is the most beautiful truth. When you learn to love yourself in aloneness, you become a better person in togetherness. You no longer enter relationships out of fear of being alone, but out of the joy of sharing. You no longer demand that others make you feel whole because you already feel whole within. This makes you more peaceful, more generous, and more loving. You stop clinging, stop begging, and start giving. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't think of it as loneliness. Think of it as a date with yourself, a meeting with your own soul. Talk to yourself kindly. Remind yourself of your worth and remember that God's love flows through you. In that sacred aloneness, you will learn to love yourself deeply, and that love will shine through every part of your life. Life today is louder than ever. Everywhere we turn, there is noise. The noise of conversations, the noise of responsibilities, the noise of television, the endless noise of social media. And amidst this constant chaos, there is a gentle, loving voice that often goes unheard, the voice of God. It does not shout, it does not force, it does not demand. Instead, it whispers softly, waiting for us to listen. But how can we hear a whisper when our world is filled with noise? The answer is simple: aloneness. When we embrace moments of solitude, we give ourselves the chance to hear God's guidance clearly. Think about a radio. When it is not tuned properly, all you hear is static, crackling, and disturbance. But when you adjust the dial carefully, the static disappears and the music flows beautifully. Our life is just like that radio. When we are surrounded by constant distraction, we hear only static, but when we sit alone in stillness, the frequency becomes clear and the music of God's guidance begins to flow. Aloneness is the tuning dial that aligns our soul with His voice. Daily life gives us countless examples of this. Imagine a person facing a difficult decision. Should they change jobs? Should they end a relationship? Should they take a risk? They ask friends, they consult family, they even scroll through advice on the internet. Everyone has an opinion, but the more voices they hear, the more confused they become. But then, in a quiet moment of solitude, they sit alone, close their eyes, and pray. And slowly, an inner clarity begins to rise. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it feels true. That inner clarity is nothing but God's guidance, finally heard in silence. Another example: parents often say they want the best for their children, but they are unsure how to guide them. In the rush of daily chores, arguments, and responsibilities, they feel lost. Yet, when they find a few minutes of aloneness, maybe in the early morning before the house wakes up, and they quietly reflect, they suddenly feel a sense of direction, what words to say, what actions to take, how to show love. That direction did not come from outside, it came from the stillness of being alone with God. Even in history and spirituality, the greatest leaders and teachers often retreated into solitude before making big decisions. They did not run into crowds for answers, they went into silence. Because they understood that in silence, the heart becomes receptive to divine guidance. Just like the surface of a lake becomes clear when the winds stop, the mind becomes clear in aloneness, allowing God's wisdom to reflect in it. In our modern lives, we are often afraid of silence. Many people cannot sit even for a few minutes without their phone, music, or conversation. But silence is not emptiness, it is space for the divine to speak. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room. At first, your mind may run wild with thoughts. I have to do this. I forgot that. What will happen tomorrow? But if you stay a little longer, slowly the noise fades. A calmness enters. And in that calmness, you feel ideas, feelings, or directions that you never noticed before. That is God guiding you. Consider a young student preparing for exams. She studies with her friends, but she often gets distracted by jokes, laughter, and conversations. Then one evening, she sits alone at her desk in a quiet room. No distractions, no noise. In that silence, her focus deepens, and she absorbs more in 1 hour than she did in a whole day with her friends. The lesson here is simple. Just as silence gives clarity to the student's mind, silence also gives clarity to our soul, allowing us to hear God's gentle instructions. There is also a healing power in this. When we are hurt, confused, or broken, we often run to others for comfort. And yes, people can support us, but true healing only begins when we spend time alone with God. In aloneness, tears may flow, but with those tears comes release. In aloneness, prayers may rise, and with those prayers comes peace. Slowly, guidance comes, not in the form of loud answers, but in the form of deep knowing. This is the way forward. This is what I need to let go. This is what I must embrace. God's guidance is not always about what to do. Sometimes it is about how to be. When you sit in solitude, you may not hear, "Take this job," or "Go to this place." Instead, you may feel, "Be patient, be calm, trust." And often, that inner strength changes everything. Because when you are patient, calm, and trusting, the right doors open on their own. So, aloneness is not loneliness. It is the sacred classroom where God becomes the teacher and you become the student. Every minute spent in solitude is an invitation to hear His whispers. People may give you advice, but only God gives you truth. People may suggest, but only God gives you clarity. And all He asks from you is silence, attention, and willingness to listen. The next time you are confused, lost, or burdened, don't rush to the crowd for answers. Instead, take a step back. Sit quietly in your room, under a tree, or even in a simple corner of your home. Breathe deeply, close your eyes, and listen. The answers may not come immediately, but they will come. Because God is always speaking. The question is whether we are listening. And the best way to listen is in aloneness.